Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Mishpatim, Tav Shin Pei Daled, and we will be starting from Perek Chav Beis, chapter 22, Pasuk Chav Daled, verse 24. And the pasuk reads like this: Im kesef talve es ami. Now, actually, the very first word of this verse presents a question. What does that word im mean? You know what the word im means?
When?
Now, actually, the word im usually means if. That's what it usually means. So now, if so, let's just read the pasuk with that. Im kesef taves ami, if you will lend money to my people, ase ani imach, to the poor that is with you, leisia lo kenosha, you should not be to him like a creditor, meaning like a person who he owes money to. Leisimin alav neshech, you should not place interest upon him. So the pasuk is saying that when you lend a person money, so the last part of the pasuk says, do not charge interest. A prohibition to charge a Jew interest when you lend him money. It also says, loisia lo kenosha, don't be like a creditor to him. And Rashi explains that what the Torah is saying there is don't be as a creditor to him means don't forcefully demand the money from him. If you know he can't pay, then you're not allowed to start going after him and pressuring him to pay. That's what it means. Don't be to him like a creditor. I mean, you lent him the money, but don't act like a creditor if he can't pay. If he can pay, it's a different story. But if he can't pay, don't go around and pressuring him to get him to pay. But rather, don't be like a creditor, which means act as if you didn't lend him any money. Doesn't mean you're not going to collect it at some point, but if you know that he can't pay, don't keep pressuring him to pay.
No.
Now, so the Torah is saying two things. Don't pressure him if he can't pay. Don't charge him interest. But getting back to the first word, where the Torah says, im, kesav taves ami, which we would typically translate as, if you will lend my people money. So Rashi comments that Rashi's wording is, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, the sage Rabbi Shmuel said, Rashi is quoting the Mechilta, which is the halachic medrash of the Torah, Kol im ve'im shabbat Torah. Any time it says im in the Torah, it's reshus. It's something that's not obligatory. If you say if means it's up to you. So in the Torah, the word im means typically if, which means something that's not obligatory. Chutz migimel. There are three exceptions to that. And guess what? One of them is this pasuk. When it says, if you will lend money, it's not if you will lend money, it's when you will lend money. Because if you will lend money sounds like lending money is voluntary. And the answer is it's not. If somebody needs money and you have the money to lend him, and you know he's going to pay you back, then that's someone that you're obligated to lend the money to. Lending money isn't just something that you decide to do. Lending money is tzedakah. It's a form of tzedakah. If a person needs money, you know the person needs the money, and you know he's going to pay you back, you're obligated to pay him. So therefore, Rashi says, the word can't be translated as if you will lend money, because it's not about if, it's when. And understandably, if you don't have your own money to lend, you're not going to lend any money. But if you have the money to lend, then you're obligated. And therefore, once we're talking about lending money, we shouldn't be talking about it as if it's voluntary, but rather it's obligatory. And therefore, Rashi says, in this context, the word im should not be translated as if, but as when. Okay? Now, the question then is, all right, well, if the Torah means to say here that it's an obligation, not voluntary, then why did the Torah use the word im? Why use the word that typically means if? Use the word when. The Torah can use the word when. The Torah doesn't have to say if. Why would the Torah choose the word if, which typically means voluntary if, and you have to say no, it can't be voluntary because it's not. It's a mitzvah, it's an obligation. It must be when. So why did the Torah use the word if? So I want to share with you a few explanations. One explanation is the explanation of the Das HaKenim, who explains that the reason why the Torah says if is because you're right. Essentially, lending money is an obligation. It's a mitzvah. However, there will be times when when you're not obligated to lend the money. And that is, again, if I believe that this is the meaning of the Das Kanim, if let's say you come to me, or not you, Akani, if somebody comes to me and says, can I borrow money from you? And you know he's not going to pay you back. You just know it. He needs the money, but you know about this guy, he doesn't pay back his loans. Maybe even borrowed from you before and he didn't pay back the money. So he needs the money, but he's not going to pay. You know he's not going to pay. That's his track record. Are you obligated to lend him the money? No, you're not. No. You're not obligated then. But if you do it, you'll still have a mitzvah. But to say that in this situation, I'm obligated to lend him the money? No, I'm not obligated to lend him the money. However, if you do, okay, so you'll get a mitzvah doing that. And
conditional mitzvah?
Yeah.
I can do it?
Yeah. Yeah. It means you're not obligated, but if you do it, you'll get a mitzvah. And you'll get a full-fledged mitzvah for it. It's just that in these cases, the mitzvah is actually, under these kind of circumstances, you're not obligated to actually do it. If he's not going to pay you back, right? Then you're not obligated to lend him the money. That's my understanding of what he's saying. But if you lend him the money, if at the end of the day you still lend him the money, you decide you're going to lend him anyway, because who knows, maybe this time I'll get the money back. Well, you still got to treat him like any other borrower. Don't charge interest to him. You still can't charge interest. So that is one explanation. So the reason why the Torah used the word if, when it's actually an obligation, says the Das Kanim, is because there are times when it's not going to be an obligation. And that's what Torah is alluding to here. Whether you're obligated to lend him the money or not, and you lend him the money, there are rules about how you lend a person money. That you're not allowed to charge interest. If he can't pay you, then don't act like a creditor. But at the end of it, what the Torah is doing by saying the word if is to allude to the idea that there will be times. It's if you lend money, because even though essentially it's a mitzvah, there will be times when you're not obligated to actually lend him the money. And therefore, the Torah used the word if. Now it's interesting, this idea, the way I understand what he's saying, So let's put it this way, right? All right, let's leave it for now. Okay, that's the Das Kanim's explanation. Again, the reason Torah uses the word if is because there will be times that you won't be obligated to actually lend money to a person, and therefore the Torah says if.
Where else we know borrow money is mitzvah?
Excuse me?
Where we read borrow money is mitzvah.
Lending money.
Lending money is mitzvah.
Right here.
But maybe this is if.
There are some other places too. This is not there. Where exactly? What do you mean? We know that the Torah in other places talks about giving money, right, to a person in need, right? So that would be a gift. How do we know that lending him exactly is the mitzvah too is also tzedakah?
No, but you read this passage based for the mitzvah. But if this is mitzvah,
so maybe it's not the basis for the mitzvah. I don't know. I hear your question. Good question. Yeah. Now, the commentary of the Barbanel has a different explanation. And my understanding of the Barbanel is that, yes, essentially, if a person needs a loan and he's asking for a loan and he needs a loan and you give it to him, and he needs a loan, you're obligated to give it to him. However, the reason why the Torah says the word if, says the Barbanel, is because actually, the way he explains it is that the way he explains it is that the lending of the money to this person is not an obligation. Actually, the way to do the mitzvah, says the Barbanel, if somebody needs money, the way to do the mitzvah of helping him is not to lend him the money, but to give him the money. We're talking about a poor man here. That's what it says. It says if you lend money to my people, to the poor amongst you. We're talking about a poor man here. Charity. So essentially, says the Barbanel, what the Torah is saying here is like this. If you lend money, is because really, if this person is in need of money, you should be giving him the money. That's how you do the mitzvah. But let's say the person, the poor man, doesn't want to take a gift. He doesn't want to take charity. He doesn't want to take a gift. So then what do? Then you lend him the money, because that's how he wants to take it. You, from your part, the mitzvah of tzedakah says, give him the money. But now you've got a poor man who doesn't want to take a gift, but he's ready to take a loan. So the Torah says, okay, give him a loan, and you'll get a mitzvah for doing that too. But the reason why the Torah says im kesef, which really means even in that circumstance, right? Even in that situation, he doesn't want to take the money for charity. Doesn't want to take a gift, right? But he'll take a loan. Do you have a mitzvah to give him a loan then? Yeah, you have a mitzvah to give him a loan. Because if that's how you'll help him, that's how you give it to him. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. From your part, it's supposed to be starting as a gift. Now, if he says, I'm not taking a gift, and then but he'll take a loan, okay, so now your mitzvah is to give him a loan. But the Torah says, if you lend the money to the poor, is because, again, it's trying to say that really you should be gifting it to him. But if you lend him the money because he doesn't want to take the gift, then these are the laws involved in that. So that's what our Barbanel wants to learn. The Barbanel learns that the point here is that when that im kesef, if you lend him money, what do you mean if? You're supposed to lend him money. The answer is no. I'm supposed to be giving him a gift. But if it comes out that I'm going to lend him money, why? Because either he doesn't want to take the gift, or, I didn't mention this before, the Barbanel says, let's say you're not ready to give him a gift. You're not ready to do the mitzvah properly. You're just not holding by it. But you'll give him a loan. Okay, so if you give him a loan, here are the rules of how to treat him when you give him a loan. But the Torah is saying if, because really the way you should be doing this for the poor man is gifting him the money. But if you land up lending him the money, these are the rules of that. That's the explanation of the Abarbanel. Now, I want to share with you an explanation of the Maharal, the Gur Aryeh, in his commentary on Rashi. But in order to appreciate this Abarbanel, this Gur Aryeh, we actually have to go back to a Rashi at the end of last week's Parshat. And so what you should do is, here it is, chapter 20, verse 22. Go back. You got it? Not this week's Parsha, last week's Parsha. Chapter 20.
Last one.
Yeah. Perek Chaf, chapter 20. Pasuk Chaf Beis, verse 22. Okay? Ve'imizbach avarim ta'asali. Again, the word ve'im. Why do they translate ve'im? Here.
Yeah.
Here, what's the word ve'im mean?
What?
How do you like that? Again, we have, let's just read the pasuk as is, so to speak. Ve'im mizbach avarim ta'asali, which would be translated regularly as, or we would think to translate it as, and if an altar of stones you shall make for me, loisivnes hen gazis, you shall not build them yun, because you have waved your sword over it and defiled it. This is a law that when you are going to build a altar of stone, meaning in the Mizbeach, the altar in the Mishkan tabernacle was wood. But later on, the Torah is going to say that there's going to be, that you have to, that in the Beis HaMikdash, you have to build one of stone. And the Torah is saying that when you build an altar of stone, then that cannot be, those stones cannot be cut with any kind of metal. The way that they did it was, seemingly miraculously, there was this worm that they used to basically draw a line where they wanted the stone to be cut. The worm would go across it, and it would split. That's how they did it. You could not use any kind of metal to cut the stone. So here again, Rashi says on the word ve'im mizbeach avonim. Again, Rabbi Shmuel Omer called im ve'im shabbatai rishus chutz migimol. Every time the word im appears in the Torah, it is something voluntary. It's if, something you decide to do. Chutz migimol. 3 exceptions. This pasuk that we just read, the mizbeach avodim tasali harei im zem mishamish blushan kasher. Here the word im means when. The kasher tasali mizbeach avodim. When you make for me an altar of stone, don't make it hewn with metal. You have an obligation to build an altar of stone. Shenemar avanu shleimus tivneh. Later on, it says in the Torah, whole stones you shall build it from. Meaning, it's not something voluntary in the sense that, okay, if you decide to build one of stone, no, there's going to be a time when it needs to be built of stone, and therefore the im is not if, but rather when. Okay, so this is really the first time in last week's parsha where the word ve'im, which typically is translated as if, means when. It's not if you build an altar of stone, but when you will build an altar of stone. Okay, next. V'chein, so too says Rashi, going into our parsha, im kesav talveh, where it says in our parsha, if you will lend money, chayvahu, shenemar havei tavitenu. Again, based on a pasuk in the pasuk in Devarim, we see from there it's an obligation. If you want to know, Arkady, where it says that there's the mitzvah to lend money, it's in Devarim. It's in Devarim. Okay, in the book of Devarim, Rashi says, Tesvav, chapter 15, verse 8. From the words there, we see that it's an obligation to lend him money if he needs it. Okay, so again, in our parsha, im kesav tav doesn't mean if you lend money, but it means when you lend money. V'chein. And the third example is in Vayikra, it's not in the book of Shmos, the imtakra minchas bikurim, which again means, which is if, well again, would be typically translated as, and if you will offer a minchas bikurim, a bikurim offering, a first ripened fruit offering. We're actually a mincha, a meal offering that comes from flour and oil. So it's a minchas bikurim, a bikurim meal offering. A meal offering of the first fruits. Zu mincha ha'omer. This is referring to the mincha, the meal offering that we call the omer. When do we offer? When is the omer offering brought? On the second day of Pesach, right? We have sviras ha'omer. We count from the omer. The omer was a type of a carbon. It was a sacrifice. It was a mincha, meal offering. It was from the newly ripened barley. The newly ripened barley was brought as a mincha offering on the second day of Pesach. It was the newest it was the first ripened grain of the new crop. And in order for the new crop to be able to be eaten, you had to bring this mincha offering. Once you brought the mincha offering, you were permitted to eat from the new crop. Is this a voluntary offering? It's not a voluntary offering. It's an obligation. It's a mitzvah you have to do. It's an obligation upon the community. It's a communal offering. So the im minchas bikurim is not if you bring a minchas bikurim, it's when you bring a minchas bikurim. So we have 3 examples of where the Torah used the word im, which typically means if, and it means when. You've got here by building the mizbeach, the altar of stones. You have our parsha about lending money, and you have when you're bringing the omer offering. These are 3 places where the Torah said the word im, which typically means if, and in these cases it means when, because they're not ifs, they're all obligations.
How about another bikurim?
No, that's different. That's not what this pasuk is talking about.
But
there is another
the
bikurim.
question about if or when.
Doesn't say that there. There's no word if there. That's for sure. That's an obligation also. But the Torah doesn't say the word if there.
Okay.
The word if is by the omer offering, by the minchas bikurim. That's what the Torah refers to the omer offering. Okay?
Okay, but this is question about what word is used for another bikurim, not mincha.
The Torah there uses the word bikurei ad mascha, the first fruits of your land.
Yes.
And it doesn't say mincha there.
There is no actually.
There's no mincha word there. Okay. Now I'm going to share with you how the Gur Aryeh explains in all 3 cases why the Torah used the word im. An answer for all three of them.
to combine.
Right. A common theme for all three of them. So he says like this. If the Torah would have said here, we used the word, would have used the wording for an obligation. So what would it be is like this. When I do a mitzvah, right? In order to fulfill the mitzvah, do I have to want to do the mitzvah, or as long as I do the mitzvah? Let's say the only reason I do a mitzvah is because I know Hashem said so. And do I really want to do the mitzvah? Maybe not. But Hashem told me to do it. So I'm doing it because Hashem told me to do it. When you do that, you get a mitzvah? You get a mitzvah. Is it a greater mitzvah if I do it because I want to do it? Yeah. You should want to do mitzvahs, right? You should want to do mitzvahs. You should want to do mitzvahs. So the Gur Aryeh says that in these three cases, if you do these mitzvahs with an attitude of, I'm doing it because Hashem told me to do it, and you're not doing it because you want to do it, then your mitzvah is lacking. It's not that you don't have a mitzvah, but the mitzvah, the actual mitzvah itself is going to be missing something. It's lacking something. In these three examples, if you don't want to do it, wanting to do it is an essential part of the mitzvah. And if I don't do it because I want to do it, then the mitzvah itself is lacking. If I put on tzitzis, right? I don't want to put on tzitzis, but I did it because Hashem said to do it. Is there anything lacking in my mitzvah? No. Good. Anytime you have a mitzvah and you do it because you want to do it, it definitely enhances the mitzvah. It definitely makes the mitzvah greater in certain ways, but it's not changing. It's not saying anything about the actual mitzvah itself. If you put on tzitzis because I have to, you have done the mitzvah of tzitzis. If you would have done the mitzvah of tzitzis because you want to do the mitzvah, it would have enhanced the mitzvah. Would have given the mitzvah greater merit. But the mitzvah itself is not lacking. In these examples of the Torah, if you do them only because Hashem told you to do it, then the mitzvah is lacking. And the wording that the Maharal uses is ein zeh davar, which means ein zeh davar means this is not something. Sounds like it's nothing. And I don't think it means nothing, but it means to say this mitzvah is really, really lacking. The mitzvah itself is really lacking. It's missing an essential part to it. So let's go through all three as he does. Why do we build a mizbeach? This parsha, the first time, Parshas Yisrael, im mizbeach avanim. If you build an altar for Hashem to bring karbanos, right, to bring sacrifices, right? And why do you do it? Because Hashem told me to do it. You want to do it? But why am I doing it? Because Hashem told me to do it. If that's how you build the altar, then it's not just like, okay, I have a mitzvah, but it's not enhanced. The mitzvah is lacking because what's building an altar about? It's about what we call avoda. It's about worshiping Hashem. It's the greatest form of showing our worship and devotion to Hashem. If you do that because you don't mean it without really wanting to do it, if you don't really want to do it, it means you don't mean it. You're doing it because I have to do it. If you're not doing it because you want to do it, then it's lacking. The whole mitzvah is lacking. And if you think about it, it's not just this. If this is the idea, then it's not just this mitzvah that's included. It would be included not only making the altar, but bringing the sacrifices itself. If I bring the sacrifices because I have to do it, then again, this is supposed to be worship. This is supposed to be your greatest expression of devotion to Hashem. And you're just doing it because you have to, then okay, you did it. You fulfilled your obligation, but the mitzvah itself is really lacking. It's missing an essential part of it. And you know what else it would include? What do we have instead of sacrifices? Prayer, right? If you pray to Hashem because I have to, then there's something really missing in your prayer.
No, but this is major factor. This is he free us to serve. This is directly say to serve me.
right?
But what is to serve, to sacrifice, or prayer?
Are you asking a question? Or are you?
No, this is what
That's the idea,
support ideas.
right?
If you
That's the
don't,
essential idea.
it is not
You're
what
missing
I.
the whole. You're missing the whole point.
What point?
So you did it, and you'll probably get some credit for doing it, but you missed the whole point. Which that's what it means. The mitzvah is missing. The mitzvah is lacking itself. Next example. Now this is a really interesting idea. Carrying this to the next example, which is our parsha, right? Im kesav talves ami, right? Says the Gorarye, v'chein im hilva kesef, kilo mekayim gzeres hamelach. If you lend the money as fulfilling an obligation, the king said, "Lend the money." All right, I'll lend the money. This is now. Listen to these words. I can't imagine he means it literally. The words of the Gorarye, "Ein ze mitzvah." That means it's not a mitzvah. I don't think he means you don't get any credit for a mitzvah here, but he clearly means you're really missing. Because when you do the mitzvah of lending money, it has to be out of the goodness of your heart. Why are you lending money to this person? To help him. When you help someone, it's not just about having him getting the money to him. It's not just about filling the missing money. It's about helping the person. It's about caring for the person. When you go ahead and you give them money, your heart needs to be there. You need to want to be helping the person, not just giving him money, not just filling what he's lacking, but it should be an act of love, an act of caring, an act that comes from the heart. So it's very interesting because at the end of the day, he's got the money, which is, you'd say to yourself, that's the most important thing. But says the Gerai, the Torah is saying that if there's heart lacking in it, if you're not doing it because you want, you're not doing it because you want to help the person, because you care about the person, then the mitzvah is missing. Ain's a mitzvah, he says. That's not a mitzvah, which I think doesn't mean he doesn't get a mitzvah for it. He'll get some mitzvah for it. He did a mitzvah, but he's missing an essential part. The mitzvah is missing an essential part of it. And that is the fact, not just to give him the money, but about helping him and wanting to help him. The third example was the Minchas Bikurim, which we said it was the Omer carbon. There too, says the Gorarye, you got to have your heart in it. And he explains, because what is the idea of the carbon omer? What is the idea behind that sacrifice specifically? And he says that the Medrash explains. I'll read to you the wording he has. Ki yusparach mala anonim. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the one who brings the clouds. Umayrid gashamim, he brings down the rain. Umafriach talalim, he brings down the dew. Umatzmiach adama, he makes the ground sprout, makes the ground bring out the crops. Umedashan apeiros, and he fattens the produce. It means he makes the produce well. So basically, carbon, and how do we pay him back? We pay him back with this omer offering. All this is to express that we recognize that Hashem is the one who has made these fruits grow and has given it to us. And that needs a thanks from the heart. So what is the meaning behind the carbon omer? The carbon omer is the first fruit, the first produce of the year. At that point, we recognize that why do we have this produce? Because Hashem gave it to us. And the way that we express that is that we give him back some of it. Not because he needs it. He doesn't need any produce, but when we go ahead and we give him back the produce, that's our way of expressing that we recognize that it comes from him, and that's how we thank him for it. Okay, so let me ask you something. You ever see, sometimes you tell a little child, right? Say thank you. Child doesn't want to say thank you. Say thank you. Child says thank you. Okay, we do that for a child because we want to get them used to doing something, but it's not a real thank you. So imagine a king says, everybody has to come and thank me. And no one wants to really thank him, but you got to thank him because he said, come thank me, right? So you're going through the motions. You're going through the motion, but are you really thanking? You're not really thanking. So when we're supposed to be expressing our thanks to Hashem in the Omer carbon, What's happening is that again, if we're not doing it out of wanting to do it, if we're bringing the minchas omer because we have to fulfill the decree of the king, then what's happening then is that what's supposed to be an expression of thanks is not real expression of thanks. It can only be a real expression of thanks if we want to bring the omer carbon, if we want to use this as an expression of thanks. It can't just be going through the motion of thanks. That's not real gratitude. Real gratitude comes from the heart. You have to want to bring the Omer offering. So therefore, the Omer is another example of if you don't do this mitzvah because you want to do it, if you don't do it because you want to do it, then you're not really thanking Hashem, which is the essence of bringing the Omer carbon. So the point of the Gur Aryeh is that in all three examples, the Torah is talking about things that were an obligation, but the Torah phrased it as if it's voluntary. Why? Because when you do something voluntary, why are you doing it? Because you want to do it, right? That's what voluntary means. I didn't have to do it, but I want to do it. So the Torah wants to phrase these obligations as something voluntary because it's trying to tell us you have to do it like it's voluntary. You got to do it because you want to do it. And if you don't do it because you want to do it, then the mitzvah itself is lacking. The mitzvah itself is missing. You will get credit for doing an act, but that mitzvah in itself will be missing an essential part of it. It's missing desire, wanting to do it. In these examples are an essential part. If you don't worship Hashem because out of the desire of your heart, because you want to, if you don't help a person because you want to help him, because you have to help them, if you don't if you don't thank Hashem because you want to thank Hashem, because you have to thank Hashem, then in all of these examples, the mitzvah itself is lacking. It's sorely lacking. The mitzvah itself is missing an essential part of it. And therefore, the Torah said the word im by all these obligations to say, treat these obligations as if you do it, as if it's voluntary. Because if you act as if it's voluntary, meaning you do it because you want to do it, then you'll be able to fulfill the mitzvah. Then you'll have a complete mitzvah. Otherwise, it'll be a very incomplete mitzvah with the very strong wording that the Gur Aryeh used. But if you have that desire, you do it because you want to do it, then the mitzvah will be whole and complete. Have a wonderful evening.
But